Welcome to Engaging Leaders, a Leadership Maryland podcast brought to you by Beacon at Salisbury University and BFG Financial Advisors. Since 1992, Leadership Maryland has been connecting and empowering leaders through transformational experiences, dialogue, and education. Each month, we host candid conversations to promote positive outcomes in your organizations and communities. I'm your host, Eric Brotman, and our guest today needs very little introduction in the state of Maryland, but I'm going to do my best to introduce Maryland Higher Education Secretary Dr. James Fielder. Jim has been appointed by 4 different Maryland governors to a variety of different commissions in leadership capacity. He is the current Secretary of Maryland Higher Education Commission. He's been Secretary of Labor for Licensing and Regulation, Deputy and Acting Secretary for Business and Economic Development. He was a member of Governor Hogan's transition team and has served in a variety of roles, including at Towson University's Vice President of Finance and Administration and the Director of Budget, Personnel, and Institutional Research at the University of Michigan, Flint. Jim, welcome to the show. We're so glad to have you on board.
Thank you. This is a tremendous opportunity. Thank you.
Well, this has been a unique year, and lots of folks hopefully will be very happy that 2020 is behind us. Want to talk a little bit about your path in general, but also what this year has looked like and how leadership has been tested during what is a unique time.
Well, it's so key when you use the word 2021. None of us want to wish away time, but 2020 has been challenging in so many personal, professional, national, international ways, and leadership is the key for moving us forward. You think about leadership versus management. You lead people, you manage budgets, you lead organizations, and you do that through what I consider the twin sisters of leadership. Optimism is what you bring personally every day to your job. Inspiration is what you create for your team. So when you think about leadership in the United States or throughout the world, and just go back a few years, go back 4 years and said, how many people did you talk to that would say leadership doesn't matter? It doesn't matter who's at the top. And we know right now that it does matter. Tone at the top is so critical to what you're able to do, not presently, but also for your future. And we think about leadership versus management again, and some of the differences are so key. Decision making, communication skills, all those things which we can highlight a little bit deeper if you wanted to. But I'll stop there and let you go ahead with your next question.
Well, Jim, I love that. I think optimism is something that I certainly wouldn't know what to do without, and I do carry that with me every day. And I think many of us, in the Leadership Maryland community, I think there's a lot of that. And then inspiration is something that is difficult to describe. When somebody feels inspired, they really can run through a wall. And so getting people to want to act together, pull together, work together, and really create positive change is very much what you're talking about, and I love that. So let's talk about the state for a bit, and specifically, let's talk a little bit about where we are from an economic standpoint moving forward. There's a lot of challenges facing us. What's next on our horizon at the state level?
I think at the state level, we are blessed to be in a state that is forward-facing, is leaning forward. We're fortunate in terms of the leadership in the state and the understanding of the crisis communication that is so key. And by crisis communication, I mean the differences in a period of a crisis is communication has to be clear, concise, focused, frequent, and regular. You take out any of those elements, and then you have individuals or organizations that start to make their own leadership. When that happens, you have groups going in different directions. When you're able to set at the very beginning the importance of that communication and leadership, you are engaging everyone. You're embracing with a vision, a common vision. We will get through this, we will do this, we will do that. And the knowledge that the communication is going to be regular provides some stability in an unpredictable environment. And right now, everything is very unpredictable. You can say, okay, what's the next holiday? Are we going to be together as a family? You know, is the college going to open on time? About the vehicle administration, are we going to be able? All those questions are unpredictable in some states. Maryland has made the commitment to provide as much predictable information as possible. And right from the very top, right from the very start, Governor Hogan is focused with his cabinet on, we will do this. And it started on March 8th and is carried forward every week. So some of the critical elements of where we are in Maryland as an economy, we have one of the most educated workforces in the United States. We have 72 federal labs and facilities. You put those two things together and you understand why research and development dollars from throughout the world are so heavily invested in Maryland. The expectation of what are we doing on the future on cloud computing, big data, data analytics, nanotechnology with biotechnology, all those information things. The understanding that you can use deep data analysis for cancer research. It accelerates the research and shortens the time to new discovery. All those things fit together in our economy. Yes, we have a full range of economic needs, and we're facing that by pushing the broadest access to higher education or post-high school that we can possibly get to. The goal of 55% of our workers over 24 to age of 65 will have a post-high school degree certificate by 2025 is on track. This is, one of the top and leading the nation on this. So workforce development, economic development, and education are in the same basket. And that basket is a catalyst for change in the state.
I think you hit on about 6 things there that I want to dig into. So I'm going to pick and choose a little bit and follow up. I totally agree with you that workforce development and education are inextricably linked. Though I do believe that there have been these multiple career tracks going back maybe 100 years in this country, that it's either the college track or the trades track, or, you either go to work or you go back to school. And I think higher ed is probably one of the areas, maybe other than healthcare, maybe the most impacted by COVID and by what we're experiencing now, because young people are faced with a new set of challenges when it comes to school, not just academic and not just financial, but logistic. Do you go? Do you take a gap year? Do you? Are there internships? What's the value of higher education? I think never before have I seen or heard so many people talking about whether higher education, particularly undergraduate education, is still worth what it now costs. How do you see that landscape changing particularly from a college perspective, but just in general?
That's a really good question. It's a very perceptive question and a timely question. Don't you love it when you put it all together? Now, you boil it down into your last comments, and what you're talking about, what I would look at is saying it's the commoditization of higher education, and that's a dangerous track. We have students and parents that say, what's the return on my investment? How much time will it take me to get a degree to yield X amount of income? So the danger is there if we move toward the commoditization of badges, certificates, and training as compared to critical thinking, communication skills, understanding relationships, leadership. Those key elements we are going to need even more in the future. And I think the pandemic shows some of that. Higher education is under a period of compression right now, meaning we know that the baby boom echo, and we look out at demographics, there will be fewer traditional age students. But what we are seeing throughout the United States, and a tremendous amount in Maryland, is an understanding that we need to upskill, that individuals, because of the access to distance education, online learning, hybrid classes, and so forth, people are able to take classes from home. In a class, with a hotspot in a parking lot, students are able to work on their laptops. And the student's age is changing so that it's non-traditional students that are growing the most. What we're looking at in the state, we've been working very aggressively to increase access, success through innovation in higher ed. The last 8 months since the start of the pandemic, there's been the greatest change in innovation in higher education in 20 years. If you think a year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, it said to a full professor, would you like to teach online? The majority would say no. If you ask the students and the parents, do you want to be online? And the answer would have been no, we want to go to the campus, we want to do this or that. If you look at higher education today in any state, but especially Maryland, you'll see the greatest percentage of students that are online, that are taking hybrid and clinical skills, they're coming up with new and innovative ways to do things. Well, that will carry over into the workforce. As you know, major corporations have already announced that some may decrease the amount of workers in the workspace and allow people to work from home if the metrics allow it. And this is a historic change in the way people will perceive work. It changes the need to look at the transportation links, housing starts, everything it has a direct impact on in terms of what does education work for. And you were starting out by talking about, the need, the value in higher education. Higher education not only becoming more flexible in the delivery and the service delivery remotely, but it's also focused on non-credit apprenticeship programs, internship programs, actual work related directly to academic programs. And what this does is makes an easier transition that's more transparent for the student to move from high school to college to work. The 2+2 programs, which is for a junior and senior in high school to be taken at an associate degree, that's tremendous increase of several hundred percentage points in the last 4 years. The early college, the access to using middle college is what it's being called. So there's a lot that's going on to make the coursework simultaneous and stackable so that the student is receiving a 12th grade, high school graduation at the same time they're getting an associate's degree. Now this is across the state. And when it's tied to an apprenticeship program, internship program, or credit, non-credit that blends into a degree, it becomes a shorter way to achieve the education with less expense and less time in college.
I love all of that, and actually, I'm a little bit surprised that I haven't heard more about it. Maybe it's a well-kept secret, or maybe I'm reading the wrong news.
Well,
I have a bunch of follow-up questions for you, though.
Well, I think one of the things that you just said in terms of it's not as much known, it is happening so rapidly that the change, is almost meteoric in terms of it's magnifying the need to change by the institutions, by the faculty, by administrators, and by students understanding that if they start out in a program at a high school and pick up an associate's degree, which is already articulated with a 4-year institution, they've got the first 2 years of their college degree complete. So all this compresses higher education and compresses the time to a degree, which then lessens the potential exposure to student debt. all fit together for our economy.
I think student loans are the crisis of this generation, at least financially. And I think the millennials, for better or for worse, were often sold a bill of goods that this endless borrowing that they were doing and these decisions they were making at 18 years old would be life-altering from a financial standpoint. I think Gen Z is going to get that a very different way, which I love. In terms of you talked about the commoditization of higher education. I'm a product of a liberal arts education. I do finance every day, but I'm an English major and loved English and psychology and loved the broadness of the critical thinking and the reading and the research and all the different coursework that went into liberal arts. Do you think there's with the commoditization of education and this whole discussion about ROI, are we potentially jeopardizing some of the liberal arts educations that bring well-rounded adults into adulthood?
Well, the very short answer would be yes. There's a couple ways to look at this. You speak to the fact that you've got the liberal arts degree. Your capability in sentence construction, wordsmithing, is basic communication. If you can't relate to your customers, they're going to go somewhere else. And it's that basic thing where, as humans, we go where we're loved and we stay where we're nurtured. Higher education, economic development, workforce development all function the same way. You go where you're loved and you stay where you're nurtured. So for students that move into a college and the student is successful, the college will be successful. If we go the other way and say, no, all we're going to try to do is preserve higher education institutions, bricks and mortar, fix the roof, and on, that doesn't mean we're going to have an educated workforce. So the focus is on the students in trying to provide them what they need going forward. All students are going to need the capability, as you know, Eric, in terms of communication. You can have the most wonderful invention, the furthest thinking invention. If you can't deliver it and explain it, it sits on a shelf. So that the communication, the critical thinking is so needed in everything that we're doing right now in terms of the added education, the information age. The discovery advancing so fast in cell discovery and human genome sciences, the use of allied health professions changing so radically, that's got a basis in critical thinking and communication skills. So we have to make sure that we don't get too far away from that.
That then begs the next question, which is if we're shortening the track to a degree, which from a student loan situation and from a financial situation makes sense because we're allowing young people potentially to hit the workforce sooner rather than later, which has lots of positive implications for their families and their well-being. I wonder if we're also going to be seeing a continuum of learning, a lifetime learning arc where this isn't necessarily a linear progression where people go, they do their high school and then their college and then their job, or their high school and their college, their grad school and the job. I wonder if we're not going to see folks maybe stretch some of the degree programs out a little longer while they're working so that, number one, they have an income so that they can afford to do it. And number two, their skills stay relevant. Because I don't know about you, but, when you finish college, if you finish college at 21 or 22 years old, and then you fast forward 30 years, if you haven't not only refined and updated your skills, but refined and updated your education in general, it's real hard to find opportunities. I mean, there are folks in their 50s now really struggling to find work. It is a terrible time to be out of work and 50 or 60 right now. And I have to wonder if some of that is because a lot of the skills that were learned in, as a college graduate in 1985 or 1995 are so irrelevant now that some people become like buggy whip operators in a world of automobiles.
Yeah, well, that's true. You could also say for the same for, you think of office workers, typesetters, you name it, and the level of innovation that is occurring is increasingly rapid, greater pace of change. And individuals need to continue to upskill that. So I don't necessarily see it as a lengthening of a degree, but I see it as access to more certificates, non-credit, and credit that the individual, because when you talked about higher education, the commoditization of some of the companies are looking more at the individual's skills as compared to their degree. So that's why we're seeing the proliferation and growth of IT companies, I'll say collectively, meaning that it's a very broad field, and that cybersecurity is a word that 5 years ago, what did that mean? That it meant you had a cyber and you locked it away somewhere. But now it is such a growth field. You say cyber forensics, cyber analytics, big data. I mean, all those things fit together. And there's firms that are advertising right now throughout the state that if you take a simple analysis of a form, they can determine whether you have the talent and the skill to take up that field. And that in those individual companies within 6 months will place you in a job that pays $85,000. And they're advertising everywhere. So those are real challenges to higher ed. They're challenges to the workforce to how do we fill these jobs? And as you know, the jobs of that you start as a freshman thinking you're going to graduate in 4 years or 6 years into that job, a lot of those jobs won't exist because they've been upskilled and changed to take a new type of talent.
Jim, I want to put you on the spot,
Sure.
which I get to do as the host of the show. What is the role of employers in making sure that workforces are able to stay educated and their skills sharp and relevant? As a business owner, I've often heard people say, well, this generation of folks, they change jobs every 3 to 5 years. Why would you pay for their continuing education? They could leave. And my thought always is, well, is it better to pay for their education and potentially have them leave, or to not pay for their education and have them potentially stay? Which is the worst outcome? What is the role of employers, or even how can the state be involved with employers in helping make sure that that we're not creating a workforce of Willy Lomans, like Death of a Salesman? If you're familiar with the story where really it's an antiquated profession. So ultimately, is there a role of employers, and how can private partnerships potentially help make sure that employees keep their skills relevant and stay ahead of that curve?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and the private sector companies and company owners all need to be directly involved with their workforce. And for me, it's a little bit of a difference between leadership and management. Leadership, you're leading the individuals and you're engaging them so that workers want to be engaged, not endure. It's like the difference would be that when you build your team and your team is inspired to do what you're wanting to get done versus having a team that is simply, well, I only have to do this for another week, for another month, for another year, and then I can do something different. There's a huge difference in productivity and team building. And so, it's maybe a little bit too theoretical, but the bottom line is if you have a workforce that you're supporting in terms of knowing what the vision will be, even if your vision is to how do you become more productive? And I'll give you a brief example of a company that I was a partner in Michigan. Bill Fernie was one of our press operators, and these were high-speed flexographic printers printing and die cutting and applying adhesive at high speeds on Tyvek and films and aluminum for the automotive industry. He came to my office, I was VP and comptroller, and he says, I want a raise. And then I said, well, we'll talk about it in the morning. Well, in the morning, he had all the workers in my office who were engaged and upset and wanted to know why they couldn't get a raise. And I said, okay, let's walk back to the presses. So we literally went back to the press room, and I said, Bill, that trash bin at the end of the press, how many times has it been emptied today? And he said, well, twice. And I said, and why did it take to be emptied twice? And he says, because I had to use a roll and a half of film to get it set up. And I said, do you know how much a roll costs? And he says, no. And I said, $600. And he goes, $600? And I said, yes. So you wasted $900 already. I said, when you get the waste cut in half on every press, we'll have a raise. Guess what happened within a week? It was reduced. And
Amazing.
That's the type of difference in the communication. Is open and transparent, and you can demonstrate what can happen. Bill then went on to get further education, and each time continued to work where he was, and we supported that. And what it does is becomes an opportunity for the person to come in, pick up additional education, and if possible, stay with the firm or move to another one. That creates the environment that workers and employees know that they will be supported, even if they don't stay as long as you would like. They're human resources. I mean, we have the talents and the ability to use the individuals as long as they want to stay. And understanding that is something that builds the company, it builds an organization, a university, an institution. It's not a revolving door as much as it is as an attractive element that individuals want to be there because they have the opportunity to learn.
Jim, we have time for 2 more questions. I wish we had time for 10, but we have 2. The first one that I have is, do you see the potential with higher ed and bricks and mortar campuses and some of the demographic issues? Do you see potential consolidations or closures of colleges or universities around not just the state, but around the country? And do you see repurposing of some of the campus facilities? I will tell you that in my mind, I see some of these campuses becoming over 55 or assisted living type continuing care communities because of the layout. But do you think we're going to see that, or do you think that's like Mark Twain said, the rumors of my death have been exaggerated?
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't think there's any exaggeration in your statement or in your question. Those consolidations, mergers, even used as a term, have already occurred in higher ed. If we do see the downturn in student enrollment at the traditional age, meaning coming out of high school and into higher education, if we continue to see the use of innovative ways to deliver learning, so that it's on your handheld, in your car, in your apartment, not on a campus, there will need to be the decrease of those bricks and mortar, simply as the same way it could be for corporations. You already heard that Facebook and Amazon have talked about having their workers work from home, those that can. And technology being delivered in a quickening pace with dedicated voice lines, dedicated encryption capabilities for data transfer. All those things continuing to occur is going to change the face of corporate world too, not just higher ed. So that the facilities, who would want to be working in a large building if they're the only ones there? I mean, it's hard to try to say where we're going to be in 10 years. We've seen in less than a year such a dramatic change in the use of building space. That changes the whole thing in terms of infrastructure needs. water, sewer, delivery of mail, delivery of goods has changed dramatically simply because people are staying home but working from home successfully. And the entrepreneurial spirit is growing because there's an understanding of greater independence when you start working from home and realize that you don't need to get up and drive an hour and a half to get to work when you could do that right in your own office. So all those things, it's very difficult to say exactly what's going to happen. I do think we'll see different institutions with different levels of innovation. Some institutions will want to be the very traditional, come to our beautiful campus and our beautiful residence halls with club centers and athletics and so forth. And some individuals may decide they don't want that. Some of them already have decided that. I do think that, higher ed certainly is necessary and will continue. And it'll continue to excel and lead the economy.
All right, last question. If you had to offer one tip to our listeners who spent a half hour with us today on the best way to grow leadership acumen, something ideally timeless, what would that one tip be? What would be the one way to grow as a leader?
Believe in yourself, have confidence in yourself, and surround yourself with people who do basically nothing but sterling. So you're building a team of an engaged, that you share a vision that is crisp and understandable, so that if you do this as an individual, you're basically saying you're always prepared to expect the unexpected, that you always understand that the world will constantly be pushing in on you, that you need to steel yourself every day for what you will face. That inner confidence provides your inner stability. It provides your capability to do things that are predictable. So it's an easy thing to say because we all have challenges that disrupt that, but at the same time, that would be what the guidance, at least for my thoughts, would be. It's like watch your inner thoughts, watch your inner talk, and understand that determines your outward actions.
Great advice. Jim, thank you so much for joining us on the show. You've been a great guest, and I'm taking a bunch away with me, especially the optimism and inspiration and a vibe that is really a stay tuned. Things are coming down the pike faster than we know, and I'm looking forward to being a part of that ride. And it's great to have you on the show. Thank you to all of our listeners. Thanks for listening to Engaging Leaders, a Leadership Maryland podcast brought to you by Beacon at Salisbury University and BFG Financial Advisors. This is your host, Eric Brotman, reminding you to stay engaged. Be sure to tune in for new content every month.
You've been listening to Engaging Leaders, a Leadership Maryland podcast. Leadership Maryland is the foremost statewide organization where critical conversations occur in an environment of trust and civility to facilitate actionable change. For more information, visit us at www.engagingleaderspodcast.com. Please subscribe and leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform.